Hello and welcome to Trade Routes at PCB. This is your update on international trade for March 5th, 2025. My name is Gina Cruz and I will be your host for today. Yesterday, the U.S. administration implemented 25% tariffs on Canadian-made goods imported into the U.S. As such, after a month-long delay, these tariffs are now in full effect. Additionally, the Canadian government has announced 25% retaliatory tariffs on various products imported from the U.S. effective March 4th, 2025. With each episode of Trade Routes, we will be bringing in expert guests who will speak to the topics at hand. Today, I'm joined by two leading minds in the world of international trade, Misty Gibbons, who is our Senior Trade Advisor in the U.S. Operations team, and Gloria Terhar, who is our Regulatory Analyst for the Canadian Operations. So Misty and Gloria, hello and welcome to Trade Routes today.
Hello.
Thanks for having us, Gina.
Thank you. Since the announcement, we started to see a sharp increase in questions regarding these tariffs. Our goal today is to provide our viewers with the details of the tariffs, answers to some of the recurring questions we are receiving, and that importers can use to possibly reduce tariffs on imported goods. But more on that super beneficial tool later. Misty, over to you. Tell us what you know about the U.S. tariffs.
The new tariffs that were enacted last night under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or EPA, will affect all goods produced, repaired, or altered in Canada. And these tariffs will be based on the entered value of the goods. So there's really nothing you can do to avoid the tariffs as far as where your goods are classified.
Thank you. Gloria, anything from your side, from the Canadian perspective?
So late last night, Canada published our retaliatory measures to those U.S. surtaxes that came into effect. Just around 10 o'clock, we reissued an order in council that allowed the government to impose a 25% surtax on a list of goods. The list is very, very similar to the list that was published in February. It includes 1,526 different tariff items. And if your goods are classified under one of those HS codes and they are product of the United States, so eligible to be marked as made in the United States, they're subject to those tariffs. They're going to be subject regardless of if they're shipped from the United States. So you can ship it from overseas into Canada. If it's made in the US, it's still going to be subject to that 25%. And all goods, whether they're commercial or personal, are subject to the surtax. There are some exemptions. So when we talk about goods in transit to Canada on March 4th, if they shipped at 11 p.m. Pacific time, they should still not be subject, even though that is March 5th in the East, because our order simply says goods in transit as of March 4th are not subject. We don't have a time constraint like the US. We didn't specify that specifically.
For that insight, let's get started with some of the questions we've been getting to our hotline, which for listeners, in case you would like to reach out to us, our hotline is 888-908-6638, or you can email us at tariffquestions@pcbglobaltrade.com. So speakers, tell me, how will the tariffs affect a client's imports?
Well, for goods that are coming into the United States, if they were produced in Canada, produced, repaired, or altered in Canada, they will now have 25% duty on them. Basically, the import process is still the same. You send your documents into your broker will prepare the documents for U.S. Customs, and the duties will be assessed at that time. Payment for the duties, however, are not due at the time that the truck crosses the border. They are based on the date that the goods cross the border, but they're not due until 8 days later. The best option would be to set up as ACH direct pay to CBP. This way, your goods, you'll be paying the duty directly to CBP through an ACH transmission from your bank. That way, your goods will continue to cross the border as they have in the past.
So you can set up an account to pay duties and taxes directly to the government, not have your shipment held, similar to the Canadian CARM program?
Yes, similar to that.
Thank you. Gloria, and how will it affect the Canadian importers?
Well, you gave me the perfect segue there because you mentioned the CARM program.
Awesome.
When CBSA implemented the CARM program on October 21st, 2024, they shifted the financial responsibility for the payment of duties and taxes and bonds directly to the importer. So it's no longer borne by any other party. And when we clear a shipment through customs, those surtaxes that are payable go directly to the importer's business number, and they will show up as payable in the importer's CARM client account. The caveat, of course, is that the importer must be registered for CARM for that to happen.
Right. And a bond in place soon.
Yes. Yeah. Right now, you can bring in your goods without a bond in place. So long as you're an existing importer, CBSA will grant you release prior to payment privileges, but you will have to post financial security by April 19th. And if these surtaxes persist, you're going to want to look at your bond requirements because you may need to increase it from today for what you already have posted.
Because it's based on, the bond is based on the percentage of how much duty you outlay, correct?
It's based on, if you're going with a bond, it's based on 50% of your accounts receivable with CBSA for the highest month in the past 12 months. So if you only have a $100 bond and your goods are now subject to surtax, and you could be paying $500 or $600, and then you're going to exhaust your bond very fast. So you would need to increase it.
Misty, the same on the US side, correct?
Correct. It's based on 10% of the duties due in a 12-month period. So most Canadians, because they've enjoyed duty-free treatment when entering the goods into the US, with the new substantial tariffs coming into play, they'll need to ensure that their continuous bond is sufficient to cover the 10% duties for a 12-month period going forward.
Perfect. So another question that we're getting a lot of, are the tariffs based on origin or shipping region or manufacturing point? Can you help clear that up?
The duties on the US side are applicable according to the country of production or manufacture. It is not based on the point of shipping. If the goods are manufactured in Canada or Mexico and they're being shipped to the US, they will be subject to 25% duty.
Thank you. And Gloria, anything?
I touched base on this a little bit earlier, but for Canada, it's the same as the US. If they are product of the United States, regardless of where they're shipped from in the world, and their HS code is on our subject goods list, surtax is payable.
Perfect. Thank you. How do I know if my goods will receive this extra tariff?
If the goods are released from US Customs custody on or after the date of enactment, which on the US side, it was 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time or 12:01 Eastern Time on March 4th, they would be subject to the duties. If they were released prior to that date, they will not be subject to the 25% duty.
And I'm assuming the same is for Canada?
Yeah, very, very, pretty much the exact same, except we don't have that specific hour. We just have a date of March 4th.
Is there a list anywhere? I know the US is 25%. Canada, is there a list that people can go find?
The Department of Finance has published a searchable list of the 1,526 tariff items that are currently subject to the surtax. The tariff item only goes to the 8-digit of the 10-digit tariff classification. So what that means is everything classified with those first 8 digits of any listed tariff classification are subject to surtax.
Perfect. And barring that, finding it on the list, you can always reach out to our trade advisory team who are working their fingers off doing that research for clients. And there is we are charging for that service. Okay, question about the steel and aluminum, because that happened already for the US. Now, will the 25% be on top of the previously announced aluminum and steel tariffs?
So the Section 233 aluminum and steel tariffs will not be in effect until March the 12th. It's been reenacted with an expanded tariff list. So, and it includes a lot more finished items than it did previously. But to answer your question, all of the tariffs are accumulative. So if it's made in Canada, it's subject to the IEEPA duty. And then also if it falls within those tariff classifications under the 232 aluminum and steel tariffs, it will be dutiable at 25% for that. So you could be paying 50% duty on a good that is produced in Canada, which also falls under the steel and aluminum tariffs. One thing to note is that if the steel that you are using to produce your manufactured good is from the United States, it's actually a country of origin, the United States, then it would be exempted from that additional 25%.
Oh, I didn't know that. And if the steel came from China, then you have additional tariffs?
If the steel was from China and it goes in, if it was manufactured into a product in Canada, it would be subject to the Canadian 25% duty. If the goods are imported directly from China to the U.S., it's already subject to the aluminum and steel, if it falls within the tariff classifications noted. And then it'll also be subject to the additional 20% IEEPA duty that went into effect. It just got increased to 20% yesterday.
So it could add up quickly. What can companies do to prepare for all of this? Or individuals for that matter? How can they get ahead of this or get help with it?
So one thing that they need to, as far as the U.S. side, they can't do anything as far as tariff-wise because it's covered on all tariff numbers with respect to the EPA duties. But some of the other things that they can do is look at their bond threshold, make sure that their bond is sufficient to cover 12 months worth of shipping, which probably it is not, because you probably have one that's just $50,000. And that's probably not going to be enough depending on your shipping history. You can get your tariff classifications reviewed for accuracy. That's more specifically if your goods fall within the steel and aluminum tariffs. Work with a customs broker to determine what your exposure is going to be, and then sign up for ACH duty direct to CBP so that your shipments will be able to enjoy seamless crossing across the border.
Definitely worth getting set up for ACH. Gloria, how about on the Canadian side? I know it's a little bit different with CARM. How can they get ahead of it or get some help to make sure they're compliant still?
It's very parallel to the United States. You want to assess your databases. If you're curious about your HS codes to see if they're subject, you can review the list or engage us to review the list for you. You may want to look at getting a customs ruling if you feel your product should be classified somewhere else. That will give you surety going into the future. And the way Canada has implemented these surtaxes, there's also a mechanism for applying for a company-specific remission, which if you were to lay out the correct facts and the government agrees with you, you could get a remission for your company, which we could help you write for as well. What
does a remission mean?
Remission means that you're not, the product's not subject to the surtaxes. So the HS code itself is subject, but the product based on the conditions listed in the remission order means that you have remission. You don't have to pay them at time of importation. Some cases are end use provisions for things like that. So if you do get a remission, you need to make sure that you keep careful records of how you've handled your products after importation.
In the event of an audit, sure.
Absolutely. Always have your records.
Yeah, records are, yeah, that's good. What about repair and return? I get that question a bit right now. Somebody brings up fence parts and they powder coat them and send them back. How is that being handled?
So it depends on the circumstances of the goods and what they went to Canada for and the condition they're in when they're exported from the U.S. If it's a finished product that goes up there just to be altered, so for example, if you had a pair of jeans that was completely manufactured and you sent it up to Canada to get rhinestones added to it and then sent back to the U.S., it would be only dutiable on the value added in Canada. It would qualify for clearance under 9802, which are goods that are altered or repaired in Canada and returned to the U.S. You would still pay the 25%, but it would only be based on the value of what you added in Canada.
The additional increase of the value. I was going to ask what if the 25% went on that. And one last question. What about de minimis? Is that still a thing for the U.S.? Did they change that at all?
De minimis is still on pause. We have not heard of it being reenacted. They did address it in customs message that they sent out last night that said that the new 25% duties were going into effect. And they said that it was still goods that are valued under $800 US still be entered under the de minimis provision which is sometimes called like T86 or Section 321.
And Gloria, it's not an issue in Canada because the de minimis is so low, correct?
And we never threatened at this point to remove de minimis from any imports. It's always a possibility if the U.S. were to reenact the inability to use de minimis on entries. But at this point, de minimis entries go through just like they did any other day. And if surtax is payable, surtax is paid on them, though.
So if someone needed to get in touch with your departments, the trade advisory teams, and review their classifications, check their free trade agreements with any other countries that may be in place, so they could maybe shift their purchasing habits with just, get some support for compliance. How do they do that?
They could send an email to consulting@pcbusa.com, and we could get them set up with a letter of engagement that will allow us to work on their behalf for the questions that they have.
What are the benefits of engaging with trade advisory?
We could offer insight into how you could reduce your exposure to the duties by reviewing your valuation and what charges are actually included in your value, and make sure that you are deducting all of those charges that are allowed by law from your invoice value to arrive at an entered or net value, which would be the value at which the duty is calculated.
So it could make it have it reduced a little bit if you're able to take some deductions.
And also if it's subject to the steel and aluminum tariffs, we
Right.
want to make sure that those goods are classified correctly. So we
Yeah.
could review your database as well.
And Gloria, the same into Canada?
Absolutely. Our contact email address is a little bit different, consulting@pcb.ca, but we're sister companies, so if you accidentally emailed one or the other, we would get it to the right
We'll
spot.
share. Perfect. Well, thank you for joining me today for this discussion on international trade. It was a lot of information and very informative. I look forward to your updates in the days to come. If you have any questions, comments, please feel free to reach out to us at tariffquestions@pcbglobaltrade.com. They could be answered here next time on the show. As always, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook so you don't miss any future updates. Please hit and like the subscribe button below.